We're a happy family. Was wonderful. I have wonderful memory till 22 years old. And I am missing them. It's a terrible thing. I don't believe it till it's 50 years. I still don't believe what happened to everybody.
My mother, Leona, was the one who told me the truth about my family's tragic history, a nightmare that came true for millions, and even for myself, though I was born 1 year after the war was over. My parents never spoke to me about their past, or why we didn't have relatives like other people. I was raised without the joy of knowing grandparents and aunts and uncles, playing with cousins. I do have the passion to report what my mother told me about the Shoah, which is the Hebrew word for Holocaust, Hitler's final solution for 6 million European Jews. The eldest brother of my mother was Nolek. He was married to a beautiful woman named Manya. They had just found out they were expecting the first grandchild in this family. My mother has always told me that I look like Nolek, and I like to think so too. I love the connection to him that thought gives me. Nolek and Manya, and perhaps their baby, were all either killed in the ghetto or in a concentration camp. The next eldest brother was Milech, and he was my mother's favorite sibling. My mother was already dating my father at the time, and my father, Mayor Krohn, introduced Milech to his first cousin, a young lady whose name was Itka, and they eventually married. They were also in a ghetto, and then they eventually perished in Auschwitz. And the seventh child was the baby of the family. Her name was Adela. She had red hair and blue eyes, and she loved to sing and dance, and she loved to snow ski. Adela was a talented artist, so I ski. I love to ski, and I work at being an artist, so I feel that connection with her, a very great connection with her also. She had no clear plans for her future because she was so young. She didn't know what she wanted out of life, but she didn't have a chance anyway. She was murdered in Auschwitz along with her mother and father, my grandparents. My mother met my father before the war started, and he was a very handsome man by the name of Mayor Krohn. And then September 1st came, 1939. Germany invaded Poland, the war broke out, and all hopes were shattered. Soon after that, my father decided to escape from Poland by traveling to Russia, a distance of over 200 miles. That on November 16th, 1939, the day that Jewish stars had to be worn on clothing for every Jew, that on that morning he was leaving. And for some reason, he decided to ask her to come with him. When I think about her choice, nothing in my life compares to that decision. Excuse me. My mother made a choice and walked away from her life to be with my father. Eventually, they made it to the Russian border. It was a very dangerous time and place, and they decided, they found an opportunity if they were willing to take a 27-day train ride to Chelyabinsk, Siberia, they would possibly have work when they got there. So they got in a cattle car train without bathrooms, without food, but they went on this train ride for 27 days out of the war zone and into a frozen country. They didn't have proper clothing, and there was the possibility of starvation there also. Yet it was a better choice for them as Jews than living in Poland. Their clothes lasted because every year my mother would turn them inside out, and then the next year the other way, and the next year back again. And because of her sewing ability, she was able to do that. By this time, the Germans knew that they were losing the war, and their defeat was inevitable. And they were therefore more eager to accomplish their final solution by murdering as many Jews as they could as quickly as possible by starvation, by death marches. They would walk them around the country until they were dropped dead, or they shot them. And any way that they could, any brutal method was acceptable. All of my grandparents and my great-grandparents and all of my aunts, uncles, and cousins vanished as if they had never existed. They were all gone. My parents wanted to run away from Poland as fast as possible. They were homeless, they were countryless, so they went to a displaced persons camp for Jews in Lumpertheim, Germany, and they stayed there for 2 years. I was born in this camp, Lumpertheim DP camp in Germany in 1946. We were very surprised and extremely lucky to get visas for the United States a few years later because we didn't have any families or sponsors in the United States, and to this day we really don't know how it happened that they let us in. I recently found my resident aliens border crossing identification card from 1948, and I have to admit that when I saw the word used to explain my nationality, stateless, I did spend a couple weeks being quite depressed and very, very sad about that. I just couldn't get it out of my head that no one except the United States wanted us because we were Jews. But how lucky we were that we came here. There are a lot of survivors that came from Europe and never recognized themselves as survivors because they didn't have a tattoo on their arm, or they were in hiding, or they escaped to another country. And I always try to say to them, did you lose a country? Did you lose your family? Did you lose your possessions? Are you damaged in some way? You're a survivor. It's not a contest. It doesn't matter who had it worse. Everyone who went through this horrible war in any way that they went through it, they're all survivors. And I'd like to add to that even the children of the survivors, because they grew up in these homes, they are also can qualify as survivors. My 2 incredible sons and their wives and my adorable daughter and her husband have provided my mother with 10 great-grandchildren that she has never seen. But she held them when they were babies, and she knew that many of them had their Hebrew names for the brothers and sisters who perished in Europe. Most of all, I'm just totally overwhelmed by the courage that she had as a young person and all through her life. And I seriously wonder what I would have done when she left her family with only my father's hand in her hand.